Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, but are you new here? If so, my name's Tyler and I just do consistent content on all things related hockey in the NHL overall. And yes, we are discussing the Pittsburgh Penguins goaltender Matt Murray today. As we all know, he has been subject to so many trade rumors, especially over the past year plus, and the emergence of Tristan Jarry that surely looks like the number one goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins for the foreseeable future. As we know, Matt Murray has dealt with an injury this past season, and in relief, Tristan Jarry came in and looked great, and we saw Matt Murray has, statistically speaking, his worst career in the NHL. He had a save percentage of .899, had a goals allowed average, I believe, of .287, and had 20 wins in 38 appearances, games, I should say, all in part due to his injury, but his stats definitely didn't look great, and as we know, Jim Rutherford, the GM for the Pittsburgh Penguins, has come out right after they were eliminated in that qualifying round, the Penguins, by the Canadiens, that he will be shopping one of these goaltenders this offseason, and maybe only the beginning of bigger moves to happen for this Penguins team. But when it comes to Matt Murray, he definitely seems like the odd man out between the two. As we know, he is an RFA. He has a cap of currently $3.75 million and is expected to make anywhere between $5 and $5.5 million for his next contract, if I had to guess. And there are plenty of teams interested in the likes of the 26-year-old 6'4", 178-pound goaltender drafted in the third round back in 2012 by the Penguins. And as we all know, he does have cups on his resume. He helped the Penguins drastically in the 2015-2016 season and in the 2016-2017 season in the Penguins winning back-to-back cups. But since then, things haven't been the same for Matt Murray in his game. If you look at his regular season statistics, he's been up and down with all of his stats for the most part, really looking like an MLB relief pitcher in my opinion, where one year the guy will have, say, a lower ERA, then the next year it'll be higher, and back and forth seesawing. All indications that Matt Murray is destined to have a better season next year than he did this past year, but we'll see what happens. I just find that kind of interesting given Matt Murray's stats, how they work out. But plenty of teams are interested in Matt Murray, and that goes hand in hand with why I'm doing this video. If there's any goaltender that is destined to be traded this offseason, it is Matt Murray and then everyone else. This is going to be a great goaltending market when it comes to free agency, but when it comes to trades, Matt Murray is going. It's just a matter of when and where. Jim Rutherford has stated that he has plenty of interest for Matt Murray, has offers on the table. Now it's just a matter of executing. So teams that we'll be discussing today that could be connected to Matt Murray possibly are, of course, the Edmonton Oilers, and that is going to be a short-lived conversation. I will get to that in a second. The Colorado Avalanche, that look like a possible favorite landing spot for Matt Murray as of right now. The Minnesota Wild, the Buffalo Sabres, the Calgary Flames, and I believe that is it for now. There's some other teams that you could throw in there too that would possibly be interested in, but those will be the teams I'll be discussing with you today. Starting off with the Edmonton Oilers, and make sure you stay till the end of this video to find out all the deets, by the way. I just want to throw that in there because there's plenty that I'm going to be discussing and good reasoning for each team as to why they might be interested, the kind of proposal trade that we'd see, and why it would make sense or not make sense for both sides. But starting off, Pierre Lebrun for TSN and Elliotte Freidman in a podcast both came out yesterday and explained that the Oilers and the Penguins have been in trade talks for Matt Murray, but apparently to many, the return would be too expensive for the likes of any team trying to acquire Matt Murray. Jim Rutherford is looking for a first-round pick for Matt Murray at least, which is kind of ironic given the fact that he coughed up his 15th overall first-round pick this year to the Toronto Maple Leafs in a very controversial deal with Kasperi Kapanen. So it's kind of funny how things are coming full circle now. But when it gets to this kind of deal, Edmonton Oilers GM Ken Holland has backed out of kind of doing this trade talk. As of now, it has reached a stalemate because of that reason, not wanting to cough up their first-round pick. And for this year, the Oilers' first-round pick would be 14th overall. So I understand why they don't want to cough it up per se. So taking the Oilers out of the equation as of now, we'll see if something picks up eventually. I'm not sure, though. I think that has hit its peak at this point, and now we're getting on to other teams. Let's get to the Colorado Avalanche, because the Avalanche could very well be the best suitor from recent reports that I've seen for the likes of Matt Murray. And the reasoning for that is the Avs, of course, have a goalie conundrum like the majority of teams I'll be discussing with you today, with, of course, Philip Grubauer and Pavel Francouz. They were both very solid during the season, but we know that Philip Grubauer especially has been subject to plenty of injuries since becoming an Avalanche especially, and it seems to me, from all the reports I've seen, that the Avs definitely want a guy that is reliable that will help them in the playoffs long term. And Matt Murray could be that guy. Yes, he isn't, say, far better than Philip Grubauer, but I definitely think there's an upside to him being not as injury prone, at least, even though he has had an injury. And I believe that was a concussion. I could be wrong. But he is 26 years of age, and he, of course, is still controllable being an RFA. Those are all appealing things versus like a Grubauer, who I believe has 1 or 2 years left on his contract and is in a UFA. So I understand why they would want to part ways with Grubauer. I don't think he would be part of this deal. I think they would get rid of him separately, assuming that they would get Murray. But what would they cough up for Murray? Would they be willing to give up their 24th overall first round pick? They might, because think about it. The Avs have so many assets. They have one of the best prospect pools in the AHL and a lineup currently on paper that looks like it's going to dominate for the next 5 to 10 years without question. So they would be perfectly willing to give up a later first round pick out of some other teams in the AHL, in my personal opinion. Will they do it? I'm not sure. But if they say don't want to cough up that first round pick, maybe the likes of Jim Rutherford would consider getting a second round pick instead in this year's draft, and the likes of Ian Cole, because as we know, Jim Rutherford loves having guys back in the lineup that he has familiarity with. Ian Cole being a former Penguin, I believe he's won a cup or both cups with them, of course, so that would be quite interesting as well. Ian Cole is definitely more in the latter years of his career, but he can still provide help on that defense, was strong in the playoffs at times for the Colorado Avalanche, and definitely you can use more defensive help. It doesn't hurt, and a second round pick. Is that something they might do? I'm not sure, but would it surprise me? No, it would not. Jim Rutherford has not looked the smartest in deals at times, so seeing him possibly do something like that for a guy that he knows wouldn't be surprising. He's already done that. That's been evident over these past couple years, latest with the Kasperi Kapanen trade. So keep the Colorado Avalanche in mind. They definitely are interested. But getting on to another team, let's get to the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres, another team with a goaltending conundrum with the likes of having Hutton and, of course, Linus Ullmark. Linus Ullmark is an RFA. I expect the Sabres to re-sign him. He definitely had a better year and has looked better than Hutton, in my opinion. Hutton, of course, I believe has 1 year left on his contract and as a UFA, so I'm assuming that they would just bury that if that is the case, because Hutton never lived up to the hype as a possible starter, which is what the Sabres originally signed him for. You know, he had his best years as being part of a goaltending tandem with the St. Louis Blues in the past. So things haven't been the same since, and the Sabres are definitely looking for a long-term guy. Matt Murray would make a lot of sense and would bring a playoff-type mentality to the locker room that is desperately needed for obvious reasons, right? They don't have much of any experience there with the players in their current roster. So bringing in a guy with 2 Stanley Cups on his resume, still young, 26 years of age, it doesn't hurt. But would they be willing to cough up their 8th overall pick? That would be crazy. I don't see why you would do that. It wouldn't make any sense to me. But this is the Buffalo Sabres at times. Yes, they do have a clean house when it comes to new management, but it doesn't change the fact that it could happen. Honestly, I hope it doesn't for the Sabres' sake, but who knows? They have been perfectly willing to shop that 8th overall pick. At least that's been the consensus from the reports that we've seen over since they found out they were getting the 8th overall pick. So we'll see what happens there. But if they say don't want to give up that first round pick, maybe they would give up a 2021 first or whatever it may be. I'm really not sure, but the Sabres are definitely interested, I believe. Frank Seravalli came out explaining as the Sabres, not even a week ago, explaining that the Sabres are one of the teams interested. So we'll see what happens there. Sabres fans, I hope you don't give up that pick, especially in this year's kind of draft. That's basically Antoine Lundell right around 8 there. That would really suck if you give up that pick for Matt Murray, in my opinion. But this is the NHL. Some GMs are kind of crazy, so it would not be surprising. But let's get to the third team now that I think would be interested, the Toronto Maple Leafs. This one definitely feels a little bit more of a stretch for obvious reasons. There's been rumors that maybe the Leafs and the Penguins would do a swap, possibly a 1-for-1 with Matt Murray going to the Leafs and Freddie Anderson going to the Penguins, because there's been subject that Freddie Anderson is on the trade block. I did a video regarding that really blew up. It's doing really well. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you do after this one, Leafs fans, if you're interested. But I don't think that would be a smart deal for either side, because if the Penguins, yes, they're in a win now stage, but Anderson, of course, I believe has 1 year left on his deal, and then he's going to be a free agent. I believe that's the case. So I'm not sure if that's the best idea for the Penguins to go for. I think they definitely need to help with more youth and get more prospects and picks. And the fact that they traded their first round pick to the Leafs earlier, just like 2 weeks ago, it's not looking good for the Penn side of things. So when it comes to trying to do a deal with the Leafs again, in my opinion, but the possibility is still there at the end of the day. That's why it's been thrown out there. Do I think it should happen? No, I don't think it should happen. I think that Anderson will not end up with the Penguins, and I just don't see it making sense. The Leafs, they would get a more young, controllable goaltender that they can rely on for a longer term. So maybe, but if this deal were to happen, Matt Murray wouldn't be the guy for a long term, in my opinion. I think if that were to happen, maybe the Leafs would go more in the direction like I did for the Freddie Anderson video, with the possibility of them possibly drafting a guy like Yaroslav Askarov with their 13th overall pick. I believe that, no, the 15th overall pick, that's what they have, right? Yeah, from the Penguins. I think that would make sense as well, and I explained that in the other video. So if you're interested in that, make sure you check it out after this one. But regardless, the Leafs, I don't think they are the best fit situation to make that trade kind of happen, but I understand the interest from the Leafs side of things being for a guy like Matt Murray, cups on his resume, playoff experience, and controllable and young, all things you like to see, and you get him on a fairly good cap hit. So we'll see what happens there. But the next team, of course, we have the Calgary Flames, one of the more realistic suitors, in my opinion. The Flames, as we know, need goaltending help, along with many other help that they need in this lineup when it comes to addressing parts of their defense that I discussed in my Johnny Gaudreau proposal trade video, my last video. Make sure you check that out if you're interested. I really enjoyed making that one especially. But the Flames definitely need help with their goaltending. Cam Talbot, of course, is a UFA now. He's most likely not coming back. I don't see why they would resign him. And David Rittich has one more year on his contract. So bringing in a guy like Matt Murray makes a lot of sense for this win-now team, having a guy with the experience and controllable as well. They can afford him, and I think they can make a deal work. They have the 19th overall pick in this year's draft. Would they be willing to cough it up? I'm not sure, because this is a draft where you really don't want to give up first-round picks, even if they are, say, in part of the later round, because this draft is just that good. So we'll see what happens there, but the Flames are definitely a team to consider in this talk. I fully expect them to acquire a new goaltender, whether it's via free agency or trade by next season. But now, last but not least, we have the Minnesota Wild. The Wild are a little bit more of a stretch too, just because I don't know what direction they're going in. I don't think anyone does. Minnesota has been making some controversial deals over the past year plus. That Fiala trade was great, but besides that, I don't know how I feel about them, and I don't think they know either. They don't have an identity currently. That's been evident, and I'm not sure if they are, say, trying to go for it all, be a playoff team again next year, or are they trying to be more in a retool/rebuild, which I think would be the better option for them given the kind of guys that they have in this lineup currently. But Matt Murray has been connected to the Minnesota Wild because of their goaltending conundrum. Devon Dubnick, of course, I believe has at least a year left on his contract. I'd assume they would bury that if they're able to, possibly buy him out for his last year or trade him away, because Dubnick, of course, dealt with some personal issues over this past year regarding his family, I believe, and that went hand in hand with his lack of play. But there's no doubting Devon Dubnick has hit his peak of his career, and his time in Minnesota surely seems done, in my opinion. Alex Stalock has been solid. I would assume he'd stay the backup or maybe get dealt too. But what makes this more of a stretch, in my opinion, is the fact of Kaapo Kähkönen. I personally like him a lot. I think he could be the goaltender of the future for the Minnesota Wild, but I understand Wild fans might have a different opinion than I do. So if you do, let me know in the comments below. But maybe because of Kaapo Kähkönen, they don't give much interest in Matt Murray going forward. I'm really not sure there. And they do have the 9th overall pick in this year's draft, in which I know they wouldn't necessarily love to give up, and I don't think they would give up for Matt Murray. I don't think that would be a smart deal at all, but NHL GMs are crazy at the end of the day. Who knows what to expect with them? So consider that, or maybe not if they don't go for the 9th overall pick. Maybe they'd be willing to part ways with a guy like Jonas Brodin, who looks like the odd man out with their defensive situation. Brodin has 1 year left on his contract with a cap hit of just over $4 million, a very solid defenseman, and he may very well be on his way out from Minnesota sooner rather than later with the expansion draft coming up, and they probably won't be able to protect him. So we'll see what happens there, but Jonas Brodin would make a lot of sense in this deal, possibly a 1-for-1. I think he has more value than the likes of Matt Murray, but especially with him essentially being a rental with only having 1 year left on his contract and being a UFA, and I don't think they would need to lock him in for an extension to make this deal happen, right? So I think that is something to consider, but I would love to hear all your thoughts in the comments below, guys, and thank you all so much for the support thus far. It means so much to me. We're so close to 1K. I can't believe we're this close to it. Help us get there, because once I do, I'm going to start especially doing live streams sooner rather than later. I can't wait to do that, possibly doing like play-by-play regarding the games, playoff games, maybe even Stanley Cup if we get there by then. I'm not sure. And also, of course, talking about things regarding the draft if we're there around that time, among other things, doing Q&A. I can't wait to do that kind of stuff. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this kind of hockey content. Thank you all so much that's been commenting, liking, and just being a new subscriber. thank you for following me. It means a lot to me. And I can't wait to get in conversations with you if I haven't already. I love this hockey community so much. But check out my previous videos down below regarding other trade proposals if you haven't seen them, or just trade rumors overall, with my latest being Johnny Gaudreau. Had a lot of fun with that one. I posted it way too late, just over a day ago at almost midnight. I don't know why I did it then. I think that goes hand in hand with why so many people aren't necessarily coming across it. But that's besides the point. Thank you all so much, guys. Hit like, hit subscribe if you like this kind of hockey content, and I will be back very, very soon.